I stood in the kitchen, stirring the sauce for lasagna, my son Elliot's favorite dish. Around the dining room table in the living room, the family was discussing their upcoming vacation in Hawaii. Their voices sounded excited, laughter occasionally interrupting the conversation. No one even looked in my direction, even though the door was open and they were well aware that I was cooking them dinner. "We should definitely book a trip to Kilauea Volcano," said Shannon, my sister-in-law. "I've read that it's one of the most spectacular places on the island." "What about surfing?" my grandson Reese asked. "Josh from school went there last summer and learned to surf in just 3 days." "Of course, surfing is a must," replied Elliot. "I've already found a great school with individual instructors." I wiped my hands on the kitchen towel and walked to the doorway. I smiled as I looked at my family. Shannon, with perfectly styled blonde hair, was showing something on a tablet to my grandchildren. Elliot, so much like his father with that same slightly mocking look and dimpled chin, was peering over her shoulder. "I was in Hawaii once," I said, catching their attention. "Your grandfather and I went there for our 20th wedding anniversary. There's a great lookout on the north shore of Kauai that has an amazing view of the ocean." Shannon rolled her eyes faintly. "That was 100 years ago, Vivian. It's probably different now." "Yes, Mom," Elliot said, backing her up. "Tourism is growing. New places are popping up. We'd better look at the current recommendations." I nodded and went back to the stove. Of course, that wasn't 100 years ago, but only 25. Not much by geologic standards, considering the Hawaiian Islands are millions of years old. But I had gotten used to having everything about me treated as ancient history. As I was serving lasagna to the table, Shannon was just showing everyone pictures of a black sand beach. "That's Punaluu Beach," she explained. "The sand there is black because of volcanic activity." "Punaluu," I repeated, putting the hot dish in the center of the table. Howard and I had been there. There are green sea turtles basking on the sand. "Grandma, are you sure you've been there?" Reese asked hesitantly. "I think you're confusing it with something on TV." "Of course I was," I smiled, pulling my old wallet out of my apron pocket. Between the credit cards, I kept a small black and white photograph. Here it was. In the photo, Howard and I stood embraced against the backdrop of a dark beach. I was wearing a flowing floral print dress and he was wearing a light-colored shirt and shorts. We were smiling as if we had just shared some secret. "Wow," Piper, my youngest granddaughter, said quietly as she looked at the picture. "You were so beautiful, Grandma." Shannon quickly glanced at the photo. "Honey, put your grandmother some lasagna. Vivian, sit with us." She pointed to a chair at the far end of the table, though I had always sat next to Elliot before. I returned the picture to my purse and sat down in the designated seat. This kitchen had once been my territory. Howard always said I was the best hostess in Ann Arbor. We often had dinner parties, invited friends, Howard's coworkers from the construction company. After he retired, we traveled, made plans, and then I had a heart attack, and I was alone in a big house. Elliot offered to move in with him. Why would I, a lonely widow, need such a big house? That was the question, but it would be more accurate to say, why would you, an old woman, need such a valuable asset? Shannon then warmly supported her husband. "We'll take care of you, Vivian," I agreed. They moved into my house and I moved into a small guest room on the first floor. That way, I didn't have to climb the stairs. Very thoughtful of them, very convenient for them. "So we're flying out next Wednesday." Shannon was looking something up on her phone. "The flight is at 6 in the morning, so we leave the house at 3:30. "That early?" Reese grimaced. "It'll give us almost a full day in Hawaii," Elliot replied as he piled on a second helping of lasagna. "It would give us time to acclimatize." I mentally visualized the route to the Detroit airport. The roads would be empty at 3:30 in the morning, but it was still about an hour's drive. "Wouldn't it make sense to stay at a hotel near the airport the night before?" I suggested. "That way you wouldn't have to get up so early." Shannon pulled away from the phone and looked at me as if she had just noticed my presence. "Oh, Vivian, it's an unnecessary expense. We've already spent quite a bit on this vacation." "I could pay for the hotel," I suggested. "Consider it my contribution to your trip." "No need, Mom." Elliot said quickly. We'll be fine. And someone has to stay home, Shannon added. We can't leave the house empty for 2 weeks. I looked at her in surprise. But I thought I was going with you guys. We were discussing a family vacation. There was an awkward silence at the table. Elliot looked over at Shannon, and she shook her head slightly. Mom, we thought you were… Elliot began. That I what? I tried to stay calm, even though I knew where this was going. That you'd rather stay home, he finished. At your age, these long flights can be tiring. At my age? I was still holding my fork over the almost untouched portion. I'm only 65. I'm in perfect health, my doctor will attest. It's not just about health, Shannon interjected. Hawaii is an active vacation. We're planning hiking, snorkeling, maybe even rock climbing. It would be hard for you to keep up with us. I could just enjoy the beach while you guys do the outdoor activities, I replied. That's not a problem. Shannon forced out a smile. Vivian, we can't leave you alone. What if you get lost or sick? No, it's too risky. I'm not 5 years old, Shannon. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself. Mom, Elliot said in that patient tone he used when he was explaining something obvious to children. We're just worried about you. And then, someone has to watch the house. Water Shannon's flowers, pick up the mail. I looked at my sister-in-law. Her flowers were the 2 orchids on the windowsill, which I already watered every week. And the mail came every 2 or 3 days, and it was mostly flyers. Of course, I said quietly. I understand. Good. Shannon was clearly relieved that the awkward moment was over. So, what else? Oh yeah, we'll need to stop by the mall tomorrow to buy new swimsuits and sunscreen. The conversation went back to discussing vacations, and I silently finished my portion. Memories of my trip to Hawaii with Howard popped into my head. How we'd sat on the beach watching the sunset. How he'd taught me how to snorkel, patiently showing me how to breathe through the snorkel. How we laughed a long time afterward, looking at our burned shoulders. Grandma, can I borrow your binoculars? Piper suddenly asked. There must be something to see. I smiled. My old binoculars were my father's, and he used them for bird watching. Sure, honey. Just be careful with it. Piper, you know we got you new digital binoculars for your birthday, Shannon reminded her. Why do you need those old ones? But grandmas have such beautiful lenses, and it's real. What do you mean, real? Shannon frowned. Yours is real too, it's just modern. Piper lowered her eyes and continued eating. I can give you my binoculars if you want them, I said after a moment. It will be yours. The girl's eyes lit up. Really? Really, I smiled. Piper doesn't need old things, Shannon interjected. She has enough modern gadgets, and why would you give away what you use, Vivian? I don't birdwatch as much as I used to, I lied. In fact, it was one of the few things that still brought me joy. Still, you shouldn't, Shannon cut me off. Piper needed to learn to use modern appliances, not old ones. I looked at my granddaughter. She didn't look up from her plate, but I saw her lips quiver slightly. At 11, she knew it was useless to argue with her mother. After dinner, I gathered the dishes and started loading the dishwasher. Through the open kitchen door, I could see Elliot and Shannon leaning over the clipboard again, looking at pictures of hotels. We got lucky with the weather, Elliot said. It's usually dry and sunny in Hawaii this time of year. I think we should book a couple of excursions in advance, Shannon replied. The most popular ones sell out quickly. I remembered how Howard and I had spontaneously decided to go to Hawaii. He came home Friday night and said, Tomorrow is our anniversary. 20 years is a serious date. How about we celebrate it in Hawaii? I laughed, thinking he was joking. But he'd already booked the tickets and hotel. Life's too short to plan all the time, Viv, he'd said. And he was right. When I finished with the dishes, the family moved into the living room to watch some movie. I quietly walked up the stairs to Elliot's former bedroom, which was now occupied by Piper and Reese. On a shelf near the window stood my old binoculars. I picked them up, wiped the lenses with the edge of my shirt, and pointed them out the window. Through the branches of an old maple tree, I could see the neighbor's house, where the evening lights were already on. The binoculars were in excellent condition, despite their age. Howard always said that good things last a long time if you take care of them. I carefully put the binoculars back on the shelf. Piper could have it later, when she was older, and could decide for herself what she needed and what she didn't. As I walked down the stairs, I heard voices coming from the living room. "Where's Grandma?" Piper asked. "Probably in her room," Elliot answered. "She went to bed early." I walked quietly into my room, trying not to squeak the floorboards. It used to be the guest bedroom, but now it was mine. It was small but cozy. On the bedside table was a picture of Howard in a simple wooden frame. He was smiling into the camera with that special smile of his that was always reserved for me. I ran my finger along the glass. "They won't take me to Hawaii, Howard," I whispered. "They say I'm too old." Of course, the picture didn't answer, but I could imagine what Howard would say. "Don't let them decide what you can and can't do, Viv. You've always been stronger than you think." I opened the nightstand drawer and pulled out a small notebook in which I jotted down my thoughts. Not a diary, just notes, ideas, sometimes poems. Today I only wrote one line. Maybe it's time to make a change. Through the thin wall, I could hear my family laughing in the living room, without me. It was a sunny morning. I woke up early as usual, though I didn't sleep well. Thoughts of last night's conversation kept me awake. The house was silent, the family was still asleep. Those were my favorite hours, when I could be a real mistress in my own house without feeling like an extra. I walked quietly into the kitchen, put the kettle on, and took the eggs out of the fridge for breakfast. The familiar morning routine was soothing. While the water was boiling, I went to the window. Through it, I could see the garage, a separate structure at the back of the lot. There, under a cover, was Howard's old Mustang, a '67 model, navy with white leather seats. Howard loved that car, always tinkering with it on weekends, keeping it in perfect condition. After he died, I didn't dare sell the car. It seemed like a betrayal. But I couldn't drive it either, too many memories. So the car remained standing in the garage, covered with a cover like a museum piece. The kettle boiled, and I made myself some tea, just black, not herbal. Shannon had once told me that real tea was bad for people my age, and she'd filled the kitchen cupboard with some herbal gatherings that smelled like hay and apothecary. But I kept buying my favorite black tea and hiding it in an old cookie tin that Shannon never opened. I ate breakfast alone, looking out the window at the waking garden. Then I washed the dishes, swept the floor, and started making breakfast for the others. Elliot liked omelets with mushrooms and cheese, Shannon preferred oatmeal with berries, and the kids usually ate cereal with milk but sometimes settled for pancakes. Today I decided to make pancakes. Maybe it would cheer me up. I was just finishing kneading the batter when I heard footsteps upstairs. Someone had gotten up. Soon Elliot appeared in the kitchen, already dressed in his slacks and t-shirt. "Good morning, Mom," he said, stretching. "You're early." "As usual," I replied with a smile. "I'm making pancakes. Would you like some coffee?" "That would be great." He sat down at the table and picked up his phone. I put a cup of freshly brewed coffee in front of him. Black, 2 spoonfuls of sugar, just the way he liked it, and went back to the stove. Soon a sleepy Piper showed up. "Grandma's making pancakes!" she cheered, climbing into a high chair at the kitchen counter. "Yes, your favorite with blueberries." I winked at my granddaughter. "Thank you." Piper smiled happily, and that genuine smile warmed my heart. Slowly, the kitchen filled with the whole family. A sleepy Reese came in, followed by Shannon in perfectly fitting pajamas and with her hair impeccable despite the early hour. "Pancakes?" She glanced around the table. "Vivian, we were talking about eating healthy. So many carbs in the morning." "It's okay to eat once," Elliot answered for me, making a second serving. "Especially since the kids love Mom's pancakes." Shannon pressed her lips together but didn't say anything, and I mentally thanked my son for his support. Moments like this were rare, but I treasured each one. After breakfast, Elliot announced that he had some work to do in the garage. He needed to change the oil in Shannon's car before the trip. The kids ran off to play, and Shannon sat at the kitchen table with her laptop, saying she needed to finish a work report. I busied myself with cleaning, trying not to disturb my sister-in-law. As I dusted the bookshelves in the living room, I heard the back door slam as Elliot went out to the garage. A short time later, Shannon's cell phone rang. I could tell by the tone of her voice that it was one of her friends calling. Hey, Jen! Yeah, we're all set. We're getting ready for our trip. Yeah, we're leaving Wednesday. I kept wiping my books, listening to the conversation. No, it's just the four of us, Shannon continued. My mother-in-law is staying home. Of course, we offered her to come with us, she laughed. Just for show, of course. You know how it is. Yes. She was obviously upset, but what can you do? She's 65, so what's Hawaii? I froze with a rag in my hand. They weren't even going to take me with them? Was it all just an act? Elliot told her yesterday that she was too old to fly with us and should stay home, Shannon continued, her voice low. But in the quiet of the house, I could still hear every word. She'd only ruin our vacation with her old habits, always whining about being tired, always wanting to sit down, leaning on Elliot's arm as she walked. I stared at the bookshelf in exasperation. Was this really how they saw me? Like a feeble old woman who was a nuisance to everyone? Yes. Sometimes I asked Elliot to give me a hand as we walked up the steep stairs at the mall. But that was only a couple of times. And yes, I did prefer to sit down sometimes during long shopping trips. Shannon could walk from window to window for hours. But I never complained, never whined. Well, technically, the house is still in her name. Shannon's voice came to me. But we've been paying the mortgage for 6 months now, so it's actually ours. Elliot says it's easier to wait than to re-register while she's still alive, because of all the paperwork. Yeah, she's not poor. Pension plus Howard's insurance. No, we didn't sell the car. It's in the garage. Elliot does it sometimes, but I think it's a waste of time. Have you seen this wreck? How much can you get for it? A couple thousand tops. I stepped back quietly, trying not to squeak the floorboards. A couple thousand? This Mustang's in perfect condition. Howard kept it as good as new. When we discussed insurance, the agent had estimated the car at $60,000 minimum, and given the rarity of the model and its perfect condition, we could count on 80. Didn't Shannon and Elliot know that? Or did they know, but lied to each other? I tiptoed down the hallway and quietly stepped out the side door into the garden. I needed to get some air, to think. My head was spinning from what I'd heard. They were never going to take me to Hawaii. They thought I was a burden. They were waiting for what? For me to die so they could take over the house? I walked down the garden path, mechanically noting that I needed to weed the lily bed. Howard had planted those lilies the year we were married. They will bloom for many years, Viv, like our love, he had said then. And they did bloom every year, even after he died. I reached the garage. The door was ajar, and from inside came the sounds of the radio running and the clinking of tools. Elliot was changing the oil in Shannon's car. I peeked inside. My son was standing with his back to me, leaning over the open hood of Shannon's silver Lexus. Nearby, against the wall, under a tarp cover, the outline of Howard's Mustang was visible. Elliot, I called out. He flinched and turned around. Mom, did you want something? I hesitated. I just wanted to ask if you needed help. Elliot looked at me in surprise. Help? With the car? No, I'm fine, thanks. Okay, I paused, looking at the Mustang. You know, I was thinking, maybe I should sell my dad's car. It's just been sitting there for so many years. Elliot straightened up, wiping his hands with a rag. Sell it? But you always said you wanted to keep it as a memento of your father. Yeah, but, I thought it was irrational. The car should be running, not standing under a cover. I moved closer and put my hand on the tarp. Howard wouldn't want it that way. I don't know, Mom. Elliot frowned. It's not just a car, it's a memory. I have your father's memory here. I touched my heart. This is just a thing. A beautiful thing, yes, but still a thing. Elliot looked at me thoughtfully. Are you serious? Quite. I held his gaze. I even looked at the price. Recently, I lied. You could get a lot of money for it. Really? Elliot raised his eyebrows. How much? The insurance agent was talking about 60, maybe 80,000. Elliot's eyes widened. Are you kidding me? For this old car? It's a classic, not old, I corrected him. And it's in perfect condition. Howard had watched every detail. Elliot whistled. Wow, I didn't realize it was worth that much. So you wouldn't mind if I sold it? I asked, watching his reaction carefully. No, of course not, he shrugged. It's your car, Mom. Do what you want with it. I nodded, hiding a smile. At least the Mustang wouldn't be a problem. Thanks, son. Then I'll take care of it after you leave. Whatever you say. Elliot leaned over Shannon's car again. Just don't get too cheap. If you want, I can help with the negotiations. Don't worry, I can handle it, I said as I left the garage. I have a person who knows about this. When I got back to the house, I heard Shannon still on the phone, but now on a different topic, something about work. I slipped into my room and closed the door tightly. I needed to think. I sat on my bed and looked at the picture of Howard. That very conversation with the insurance agent had happened a month before he died. We were renewing our home and car insurance, and the agent, a young guy with the sparkling eyes of a car fanatic, nearly fainted when Howard showed him the Mustang. That's a Shelby GT 350, he exclaimed then. There were only 2,250 of them made, and there are only a few of them in this condition. Howard smiled modestly, evidently pleased with the effect he had produced. I bought it in '82 from a collector who could no longer keep it in proper condition, he explained. She has always been with me ever since. Do you realize that it's now worth at least 10 times what you paid for it? The agent asked. Cars like this only get more expensive every year. I remembered Howard laughing then and saying he'd never sell it. It's our family heirloom, Viv, he told me later. Someday it will go to Elliot and then to his children. But Elliot didn't want it. He didn't even realize its value, thinking it was just his father's old car. And me? Well, I didn't feel like a keeper of family heirlooms anymore. Not after what I heard today. I stood up and walked over to the closet. Behind a stack of sweaters was a folder of papers, the title to the house, insurance policies, car papers, Howard's will. I pulled out the folder and sat down at the small desk by the window. The house was deeded to me solely. After Howard died, I'd been the sole owner, and I hadn't signed any papers transferring the house to Elliot. Yes, he'd been paying the mortgage for the last 6 months, but legally, I still owned the house, and the car, and the bank accounts were all in my name. Shannon thought they were just waiting, but in reality, even if something happened to me, the house wouldn't automatically pass to Elliot. Howard's will, which I hadn't changed, divided all of our property between me and my son, but with the caveat that as long as I was alive, I had full control over everything. I leaned back in my chair, thinking. For so many years, I'd lived with the idea that I had to keep everything for Elliot and his family, that my job was to just live out my days, out of their way and ready to put everything in safe hands. But were their hands safe? Did they respect what Howard and I had spent a lifetime creating? Too old to fly with us. Stay home, my son's words echoed in my head. She'd only ruin our vacation with her senile habits. I was only 65, not 90, not 80, 65. I was healthy, full of vigor, and perhaps a little tired of life only because I had allowed myself to become a ghost in my own home. But that could be changed. I looked at Howard's picture again. He'd always said that life should be lived fully, without delaying its joys. He hadn't lived to 60, gone early, but he'd lived a colorful life full of adventure and love. And me? It was as if I had paused my life after his death, gradually shrinking into a shadow. It was time for a change. I pulled a notebook and pen out of my desk drawer and started writing. Just thoughts at first, then concrete steps. Call a car dealership specializing in retro cars. Contact a realtor. Check the status of bank accounts. Pack the essentials. Only the things that have value to me. You're too old, my son said. Well, he would soon learn that his old mother was still capable of surprises. The day of departure came all too quickly. Over the past week, I had carefully thought out every step of my plan, but outwardly I remained the same caring mother and grandmother. I cooked breakfast and dinner, ironed clothes, and helped the kids with their homework. Shannon and Elliot, engrossed in preparing for the trip, seemed to notice nothing. They rarely noticed anything to do with me, though. Wednesday morning started out hectic. Even though the suitcases were packed ahead of time, there were always last-minute forgotten items, lost chargers, and sudden doubts about what was already packed. Reese, did you put your allergy pills in? Shannon yelled from the bedroom, shifting things around in her suitcase. Yes, Mom, replied her son from his room, where he was frantically searching for his headphones. Piper, where are your sandals? They're not in the suitcase. They're in a box in the closet, came the girl's voice from the bathroom. I stood quietly in the kitchen making sandwiches for their trip. I knew airport food was expensive and not always tasty, and worse on the plane. Kids would be hungry, and well-fed kids are calm kids, which is especially important on a long flight. Vivian, have you seen my sunscreen? Shannon burst into the kitchen, already dressed in her travel suit, but with disheveled hair and a slightly panicked look. In the bathroom on the second shelf, I answered, still making sandwiches. I put all of my toiletries in a separate makeup bag yesterday, and it's next to your suitcase. Shannon froze for a second, looking at me in surprise. You packed my stuff? Just the toiletries. I smiled. I thought it would save you some time. Oh, thank you. She looked a little embarrassed. That's very, thoughtful of you. She walked quickly out of the kitchen, but turned around at the door. Look, Vivian, I'm really sorry you're not coming with us. Maybe next time? I looked at her for a long moment. There was no sincerity in her eyes, only a desire for decorum. Sure, Shannon. Next time. I smiled again and went back to my sandwiches. She nodded and hurried upstairs, apparently satisfied that she had done her duty and expressed her regret, however insincere. Half an hour later, the whole family gathered in the hallway. Elliot double-checked to make sure all the paperwork was in place. Reese complained that he hadn't gotten enough sleep. Piper nervously rubbed the strap of her small travel bag. Is everyone ready? Elliot asked, looking around at his family. The car's fueled, luggage stowed, nothing forgotten. Everything seems to be in order, Shannon replied, checking the time on her watch. 3:25. We're almost on schedule. I walked over to them with a bag of foil-wrapped sandwiches, fruit, and water bottles. Here, take this for the road, I said, holding it out to Elliot. Everything you like is in there. Thanks, Mom. He took the bag and hugged me lightly with his free arm. You'll take care of the house, right? Water Shannon's flowers? Check the mail? Of course, I nodded. Don't worry about a thing. Grandma? Piper came over to me and gave me a big hug. I'll bring you a seashell from the beach, the prettiest one I can find. I hugged her back, feeling a lump in my throat. Saying goodbye to Piper was the hardest part of the family. I'll be waiting, sweetheart, I whispered in her ear. Reese gave me an awkward wave of his hand, and Shannon nodded curtly, halfway on the plane. Let's go, shall we? Elliot opened the front door. Time is of the essence. I stood on the doorstep, watching them load into the car. Shannon took the wheel. She always preferred to drive herself, even if Elliot was around. The kids settled into the back seat, Reese already wearing headphones, Piper with a book in her hands. My son took the passenger seat, slammed the door shut, and waved at me through the window. The car started, pulled onto the road, and disappeared around the corner. I stood on the doorstep for a while, listening to the fading sound of the engine. When it was quiet, I took a deep breath and went back inside, closing the door tightly behind me. For the first time in a long time, I had the house all to myself. And for the first time in a long time, I had plans that didn't revolve around my family's needs. I went up to my room and pulled a small suitcase, already half packed, out from under my bed. It contained the bare essentials: clothes, toiletries, a few books, a scrapbook of photos. Not much for a man who had lived in this house for 30 years. But material things had never been the most important thing to me. From the dresser drawer, I pulled out the phone I'd bought a week ago at a nearby mall. Simple, no frills, but with a new number my family didn't know. Next to it was a sheet with phone numbers written out: an antique car dealer, a realtor, a lawyer. I picked up the phone and dialed the first number. After a few beeps, a male voice answered. Classic Wheels Car Dealership. How can I help you? Hello, I said. My name is Vivian Holt. I'm calling about an appraisal and possible sale of a car. Shelby Mustang GT 350, 67 years old. Navy color, body and interior in perfect condition. There was a pause on the other end of the wire. Then the man asked again with undisguised excitement in his voice. Did you tell Shelby GT 350? Are you sure? Absolutely, I confirmed. My late husband bought it in '82 from a collector and kept it in perfect condition until his death. It's been in the garage for the last 8 years, but it's been serviced regularly. Mrs. Holt, I would like to see this car as soon as possible. If it's as you describe, it's a very valuable piece. You have no idea how rare it is to find a car like this in good condition. We arranged to meet in 2 hours. A man who identified himself as Nate Addison, the owner of the dealership, promised to come in person. The next call was to the realtor, a woman I'd met last week when I'd slipped into town under the pretense of going to the library without my family noticing. Olivia Barton speaking, came a cheerful female voice. Hello, Olivia, this is Vivian Holt. We met last week to discuss the possible sale of my house on Maple Street. Of course, Mrs. Holt, I remember you. Have you made a decision? Yes. I took a deep breath. I want to sell the house as soon as possible. I'm ready for appraisals and showings. Oh, that's wonderful. Olivia sounded excited. I can come over this afternoon for a preliminary appraisal and photos. Say 3 o'clock? Perfect, I replied. I'll be waiting. Finished talking, I looked at my watch. It was only 8 in the morning, and I had already set in motion processes that would completely change my life. Strangely, I felt no fear, only determination, and a strange, almost forgotten sense of freedom. I went down to the basement where the old boxes of Howard's and my things were stored. In the far corner was a wooden cabinet with drawers that held my mineral collection. I'd started collecting it in college when I'd taken geology as an elective. Howard supported my hobby, bringing me specimens from business trips and giving them as gifts for holidays. After his death, the collection became even more important to me. It was something that was mine alone, connected to him but independent of others. I opened the first drawer. Inside, on a black velvet backing, were samples of quartz in various shades, from clear to smoky black. The second drawer held semi-precious stones, amethysts, agates, jasper. The third contained fossils that Howard and I had found on our trips across the country. Each piece was neatly signed with the place and date of the find. Little pieces of earthly history that held the memory of our travels, of our life together. I pulled out the special mineral carrying case Howard had given me for my 50th birthday and began to carefully transfer the most valuable specimens into it. Not all of them, some were too bulky, others could easily be replaced. I chose the ones that had special meaning to me. Our first hike together, the stone Elliot had found as a child and proudly presented to me, a mineral with an unusual inclusion that looked like a heart. After putting the collection away, I returned to the living room and sat down at the table with a piece of paper. What to write? A long explanation, an apology. No, none of that was required. I chose simplicity. I'm starting a new life. Don't look for me. 8 words. Enough to get the point across, not enough to give away the emotion. I placed the note on the dining room table, setting it down with the crystal paperweight Howard and I had bought on our first anniversary. Next to it, I put the file with the deeds to the house and the car, and a copy of the statement I'd filled out last night after consulting with a lawyer. Everything was legal. The house belonged to me, and I had every right to dispose of it. At exactly 10 o'clock, the doorbell rang. A tall man in his 50s, wearing jeans and a plaid shirt, stood on the doorstep. Mrs. Holt? He held out his hand. Nate Addison, Classic Wheels. We spoke on the phone. Come on in, Mr. Addison. I shook his hand. The car's in the garage. Come on, I'll show you. We walked through the garden to the detached garage. I opened the door and turned on the light. Howard's Mustang was in the center of the room, under a tarpaulin cover. Here it is. I walked over to the car and pulled the cover off. Nate Addison froze in place, his eyes widening. Oh my God, he whispered. It's really her. And in this condition. He slowly walked around the car, reverently running his hand over the surface without touching it. May I? He asked, pointing to the door. Sure, I nodded and handed him the keys. You can even start it. I started it regularly to keep the engine running. Nate carefully opened the door and got behind the wheel. He put the key in the ignition and turned it. The engine started the first time, making a deep rumbling sound. It's amazing, Nate said admiringly. I haven't seen one of these in 10 years and never in this condition. He turned off the engine and got out of the car. Mrs. Holt, I'm not going to beat around the bush. I want to buy this car. I want it now, and I'm willing to pay $120,000 in cash. I held back my surprise. It was a lot more than I expected. Minus Mr. Addison, that's a very generous offer. Believe me, this car is worth every penny, he interrupted me. At an auction, you could get more for it, but it would take time, it would require paperwork, transportation. And I'm ready to pick it up today and write you a check. I thought about it. $120,000? It was more than enough for my plans, and the quickness of the transaction suited me. All right, Mr. Addison, I'm in. Nate's face broke into a wide smile. You won't regret it, Mrs. Holt. I'll make sure this beauty gets into good hands. We went back to the house where Nate wrote a check and we did all the necessary paperwork to transfer the car. He promised to send a tow truck in a couple hours. Would you like to take a picture with the car as a souvenir? He offered before he left. Many owners do that before selling. I shook my head. Thanks, but no. I have other ways to store memories. After Nate left, I immediately called the bank and made an appointment at 2 o'clock to open a new account and deposit the check. Then I called a cab service to book a car for the evening. My plan was taking shape. At 3 o'clock, Olivia Barton arrived as scheduled. She took a professional look at the house, took a lot of pictures, and made detailed measurements. Mrs. Holt, your house is in excellent condition, she said when she finished. The neighborhood is upscale. The schools are good. The transportation is excellent. I'm sure we can sell it quickly and for a good price. What's the time frame? I asked, offering her a cup of tea. With aggressive marketing and given the state of the market, I think we can find a buyer within a month, maybe even sooner. That's fine with me, I nodded. Olivia, there is one detail. My son and his family are on vacation. They'll be back in 2 weeks. I'd like the house to be on the market by then. Olivia raised her eyebrows in surprise. They don't know about your decision? They'll know when they get back, I smiled. Family reasons, you know. She nodded, clearly not wanting to go into details. Of course, that's your right. I'll have the paperwork ready by tomorrow, and we can officially put the house on the market on Friday. We agreed on the details, and Olivia left, promising to contact me the next day. In the evening, the tow truck came to pick up the Mustang. As I watched the workers carefully load the car, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. It was the last link to my old life, to Howard, to the house we'd built together. But now that connection had become a vehicle for a new life, new possibilities. I think Howard would understand. The cab arrived at 8 p.m. By that time, I had packed everything, 2 suitcases and a special container of minerals. Not much for a lifetime, but enough for a new beginning. I walked around the house one last time, checking to see if I'd forgotten anything important. The children's room, now Piper and Reese's, was where I lingered the longest. On a shelf stood my old binoculars that Piper had loved so much. I picked it up, twirled it around in my hands, remembering how my father had taught me to watch birds. Then I carefully put the binoculars in my bag. Piper would get it later, when she was ready. Back in the living room, I took another look at the short note lying on the table. Starting a new life. Don't look for me. Next to it were the deeds to the house and the notice of sale. Everything my family needed to know. The cab was waiting at the gate. I stepped out of the house, closed the door, and walked to the car without looking back. The driver helped me load my suitcases into the trunk. Where are we going, ma'am? He asked as he opened the door for me. To the airport, I answered. I have a flight to Phoenix in 3 hours. The car started up. I didn't turn around to look at the house one last time. Everything that mattered I'd already taken with me. Memories, experiences, and a newfound determination to live my life by my own rules. 14 days in Hawaii flew by like a blink of an eye. Elliot couldn't remember the last time he'd felt so rested and peaceful. It had been a long flight, but they had all slept most of the way. Even the kids, usually restless on airplanes, were tired enough to doze off almost immediately after takeoff. The cab stopped in front of their house in the late afternoon. Shannon paid the driver while Elliot took the luggage out of the trunk. The children, sleepy after the long drive, stood silently on the sidewalk, waiting for their father to find the keys. The house looks kind of dark, Shannon remarked, looking at the windows. Your mom usually leaves a light on in the hallway. Elliot shrugged. Maybe she's asleep by now. It's almost 11 o'clock. He opened the door and went in first, fumbling for the light switch in the dark hallway. Mom? He called out, turning on the light. We're back! The house greeted them with silence. Elliot glanced at Shannon, but she shrugged. He's probably asleep, she said, entering the house and taking off her light jacket. Kids, take your shoes off and bring your things upstairs. Just be quiet. Don't wake Grandma. Reese and Piper obediently took off their shoes and reached for their backpacks. I'm hungry, Piper said, yawning. Can I get something to eat? Sure, honey, Shannon replied. Let's go to the kitchen and see what's in there. She headed toward the kitchen, leaving Elliot to deal with the rest of her luggage. A moment later, her surprised voice came from there. Elliot? Could you come over here? There was something in her tone that made him wary. He left the suitcases in the hallway and walked quickly into the kitchen. Shannon was standing at the dining room table, holding some paper in her hands. Her face expressed a mixture of surprise and bewilderment. What is it? Elliot asked, coming closer. Shannon silently held out the sheet to him. It was an official notice of the sale of the house, signed by his mother and notarized. There was another paper lying on the table next to it, a note written in familiar handwriting. Starting a new life. Don't look for me. Elliot reread the short lines several times, not quite understanding their meaning. What is this nonsense? He finally said. Where's Mom? Shannon shook her head, her eyebrows drawn together. I thought she was in her room. Maybe we should check. Elliot nodded and quickly headed towards his mother's room on the first floor. He knocked on the door, and when there was no answer, he opened it cautiously. The room was empty. The bed was neatly made, the bedside table empty. No book, no glasses, no picture of his father that always stood there. Elliot opened the closet. Empty. The drawers of the dresser were empty too. Only on a shelf in the corner were a few books and an old vase that his mother had never particularly appreciated. He returned to the kitchen, where Shannon had already had time to look in all the cabinets. There's almost nothing in the refrigerator, she reported. Just some butter, a half-empty bottle of milk, and jam. Not like your mom, she always kept the fridge full. Her things aren't in her room, Elliot said, feeling the anxiety building up inside. No clothes, no personal belongings. Dad, what's going on? Reese asked, standing in the kitchen doorway. Where's Grandma? Elliot exchanged a look with Shannon, not knowing what to say. We're not sure, son, he finally said. It looks like Grandma's gone somewhere. Where? Piper asked, appearing beside her brother. How long will she be gone? Yeah. Elliot hesitated. I don't know. Let's get all of our stuff sorted out first, and then we'll find out where Grandma is. Kids, go upstairs and unpack your bags. Shannon intervened, her voice strained, but she tried to keep her voice calm. It's late. It's past your bedtime. We'll sort this out in the morning. The children reluctantly complied, though Piper cast a concerned glance at her parents before following her brother upstairs. Once they were alone, Shannon turned to her husband. Elliot, do you realize what this means? She pointed to the paperwork. She's selling the house. Our house. Technically, it's her house, Elliot said slowly, still trying to comprehend what was happening. But why? And where could she have gone? Call her, Shannon exclaimed. Call her now. Elliot pulled out his cell phone and dialed his mother's number. After a few beeps, it went to voicemail. He reset and tried again. Same result. She's not answering, he said, feeling panic rising. Maybe her cell phone was dead. At 11 o'clock at night? Shannon asked skeptically. Your mother never goes to bed without putting her phone on charge. She always said she was afraid she'd miss an emergency call. Elliot realized his wife was right. His mother was pedantic about such things. I'll check the garage, he said suddenly. Maybe there are some clues in there. He quickly went out the back door and headed for the detached garage. The door was unlocked, which was already unusual. His mother always locked the garage because of his father's old Mustang that was stored there. Elliot turned on the light and froze on the threshold. The garage was empty. No Mustang under a tarp cover, no boxes of his father's tools, no old workbench against the wall, just a dusty floor with a dark oil stain where the car used to stand. He walked slowly back into the house where Shannon was already looking through the rest of the papers on the table. Mustang's gone, he reported as he entered the kitchen. The garage was completely empty. Shannon looked up from the papers, her face pale. Elliot, this isn't just a notice of sale, it's a copy of the contract. The house has already been sold. What? He snatched the document out of her hands. No way. But the paper did bear the seal of the registry office and the date August 5th, 3 days before their return. But how could she? Elliot muttered confusedly. Where did she go? Call Claire, Shannon suggested, referring to his mother's closest friend. Maybe she knows something. Elliot nodded and pulled out his phone again. It was late, but the situation seemed serious enough to disturb the older woman. After the fifth ring, a sleepy voice answered, Hello? Claire? This is Elliot, Vivian's son. I apologize for the late call, but it's important. Do you know where my mother is? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Elliot, are you back already? Claire sounded surprised. Vivian said you weren't coming until tomorrow. We decided to come back a day early, he answered impatiently. So do you know where she is? No, darling, I don't, Claire said slowly. She called me a week ago, said she was going away for a while. Didn't say where, just said not to worry if I couldn't reach her. And that didn't surprise you? Elliot asked, feeling the irritation building. Why should it surprise me? Claire's voice became steely. Vivian is a grown woman. She has a right to travel. But she sold the house, Elliot exclaimed. Our house? Again a pause, then Claire asked cautiously, Have you found the documents? Yes, they're on the table, and a note. Starting a new life. Don't come looking for me. What does all this mean, Claire? I think it means exactly what it says, Elliot, the older woman replied dryly. Vivian is starting a new life and doesn't want to be found. But she can't just disappear. Elliot felt his voice breaking. She's my mother, and you're her son, Claire replied calmly. But that doesn't mean she has to live her life the way you think she should. I'm sorry, Elliot, but it's late and I want to go to bed. If Vivian contacts me, I'll tell her you called. She hung up, leaving Elliot in a state of shock. He turned to Shannon, who was straining to listen to the conversation. Claire doesn't know anything, he said, or pretends not to. She's definitely hiding something, Shannon agreed. But what's more important right now is what do we do with the house? If it's sold, the new owners could show up at any moment. Elliot ran a hand through his hair, trying to collect his thoughts. We should contact a lawyer. Maybe we can challenge the sale. She's not old. Maybe someone tricked her or forced her into this deal. Shannon nodded, clearly relieved that there was a plan of action. Good idea. Call Jeff Baker tomorrow morning. He's a good real estate lawyer. Elliot picked up the phone again and tried to call his mother. It went to voicemail again. He tried sending a message. Mom, we're back, and we're very worried. Please call as soon as you see this message. The message was delivered, but not read. Maybe we should go to the police, Elliot suggested. What if something happened to her? Elliot, Shannon put her hand on his shoulder. From the looks of it, your mother planned this carefully. She sold the house, took her things, left a note. It's not like it was an accident or a kidnapping. But why? Elliot looked lost. Why would she do this to us? Shannon averted her eyes. Maybe we weren't always careful enough. Attentive to her? Elliot frowned. What are you talking about? Shannon sighed. Remember when she wanted to come to Hawaii with us? She looked really upset when we told her she was too old for such a trip. But it's true, Elliot objected. She's 65, and such a long flight would be hard on her. Maybe, Shannon said quietly, or maybe we just didn't want her with us. Elliot opened his mouth to object, but couldn't. He remembered the night they discussed the trip, and the look on his mother's face when she'd realized she wasn't coming with them. He hadn't given it much thought then, but now? Do you think she's so hurt that she's willing to just give up like that? He asked. I don't know. Shannon shook her head. But something happened. People don't just sell their houses and disappear. Elliot tried calling his mother again. It went to voicemail again. He started calling again and again, feeling the panic and guilt build with each unsuccessful call. Elliot, enough, Shannon finally said, taking the phone from him. It's late. You'll only wake the kids. Let's go to bed, and in the morning we'll decide what to do next. Elliot reluctantly nodded, feeling absolutely devastated. They went upstairs, checked on the children. Both were already asleep, tired from the long journey, and went to bed. But Elliot couldn't sleep. As soon as Shannon dozed off, he picked up the phone again and continued trying to reach his mother. Call after call with no answer. At one point, he thought her phone had been turned off. Instead of ringing, it went straight to voicemail. By 3 a.m., he had made 37 calls. 37 unsuccessful attempts to contact the woman who had given him life, raised him, had always been there for him. And now she was gone, leaving only a short note. Starting a new life. Don't look for me. The morning brought new worries. At breakfast, Elliot told the children a simplified version of what had happened. Grandma had decided to travel and had gone away for a while. The children accepted this explanation without much question, though Piper looked worried. She didn't even say goodbye to me, the girl said, picking at her cereal. I wanted to give her a seashell I found on the beach. Elliot felt his heart clench. I'm sure she'll call us very soon, he said, not believing his own words. After breakfast, Shannon sent the children to play in the garden and sat down at the table with Elliot to study the deeds. The house has been sold to the Carstairs family, she said, looking over the deed. They've put down a deposit and should be paid in full by the end of the month. After that, we'll have 30 days to vacate the premises. 30 days? Elliot shook his head. How are we going to find a new place to live in that amount of time? We don't have a choice, Shannon said firmly. Unless you find a way to cancel this deal. Elliot reached for the phone. I'll call Jeff right now. While he talked to the lawyer, Shannon decided to check the garage again, hoping to find some clues. She returned a few minutes later, holding an envelope. Found this on a shelf in the garage, she said, placing the envelope on the table. It's addressed to you. Elliot finished talking to the lawyer and picked up the envelope. Inside was a folded piece of paper and a key. Elliot, the note read, written in Mom's neat handwriting. I sold Dad's Mustang for $120,000. That's a lot more than the couple thousand Shannon thought she could get for it. I put half of it in an account in Piper and Reese's name for their education. The key to the safe deposit box with the paperwork is attached. The rest of the money I kept for myself for my new life. The house is sold, and the money from the sale is also mine. It's my right. Goodbye, Mom. Elliot stared at the note, feeling the color flood his face. A couple thousand? When had Shannon ever said that? And $120,000? How did Mom know the car was worth that kind of money? What is it? Shannon asked impatiently, seeing his reaction. Silently, he held out the note to her. When she read it, she turned pale. I never said the car was worth a couple thousand, she said in a shaky voice. Never. Elliot looked at his wife carefully. Did he? Shannon averted her eyes. Well, maybe in a conversation with Jen. But your mother couldn't have heard that. We were on the phone and she wasn't home. Obviously she was, Elliot replied dryly. And she heard everything. He looked at the note again. $120,000. Half of it for the children's education. It was honorable. And in his mother's spirit, even when she left, she took care of her grandchildren. What did the lawyer say? Shannon asked, clearly wanting to change the subject. He said it was perfectly legal, Elliot replied. Mom owned the house, and she had every right to sell it. We could try to argue that she was incapacitated, but that would take some serious evidence, and judging by the meticulous planning she put into it. She was sane, Shannon finished for him. More than sane. Elliot nodded, feeling a strange mixture of anger, respect, and bitterness. You know what the most hurtful thing is? He said after a pause. She didn't even give us a chance to apologize. Just walked away. Would you have apologized? Shannon asked quietly. If you knew she was going to leave. Elliot thought for a moment. He'd always thought he was doing the right thing, taking care of his mother, giving her a roof over her head, protecting her from hardship and trouble. But now, looking at the result of his care, he wasn't so sure anymore. He picked up the phone again and dialed his mother's number. The 38th call in the last 12 hours. No answer. What do we do now? Shannon asked, looking at her husband with a lost look. Elliot put the phone down on the table. Look for a new house, he answered, and maybe a private investigator to help us find Mom. But she told me not to look for her, Shannon reminded him. I know, Elliot nodded. But I can't just let her go. She's my mother. He glanced at his phone again, hoping to see a missed call or message. The screen remained blank. Mornings in Arizona are nothing like mornings in Michigan. Here the sun rises abruptly, almost without warning, and it's immediately hot. I wake up in my little tent, and the first thing I smell is the dry, spicy scent of the desert. It smells like sage, sand, and something else that's hard to define, maybe freedom. Our camp is located at the southern edge of the Grand Canyon, in a place that regular hikers don't get to. This is the territory of serious explorers and geology buffs like me and my new friends. I climb out of my sleeping bag, pull on a t-shirt and shorts. At 65, I still have strong legs, but my knee doesn't like it when I sleep on the ground. I rub it before putting on my hiking boots. Howard always said I have a step like a deer, easy and confident. I wonder what he'd say now, seeing me out here in the wilderness with a backpack and a geology hammer. I step out of the tent and see that the camp is already waking up. Martha and Jim, a retired couple from Oregon, are cooking breakfast on the camp burner. Professor Larson, a former geology teacher, is sitting in a folding chair with a map and compass, planning today's route. The others, 6 others of varying ages, but all over 50, are slowly crawling out of their tents. Good morning, Vivian, Martha greets me, stirring something in a pot. Coffee? I'd love some, I smile, walking toward the makeshift kitchen. Jim hands me a tin mug with a steaming brew. It's strong, without milk or sugar, real camp coffee. How did you sleep? He asks. Did you get cold? Fine, I reply, taking a sip. The air is so clean in these parts, you sleep like a baby. I take a seat next to them on the camp chair. 3 weeks ago, when I first joined the group, everything seemed foreign and unfamiliar. Hard ground instead of soft bedding, camp food instead of home-cooked dinners, strangers instead of family. But now I feel like I've finally found my place. Today, we're going to the Northern Rift, Professor Larson announces as he approaches us. There should be some great quartzite specimens there, and, if we're lucky, even garnet. Garnet? I ask, feeling a rush of enthusiasm. My collection lacks a good pyrope specimen. Let's fill the gap, the professor winks. Vivian, you're going from amateur to professional every day. I smile embarrassedly. I've received more praise and recognition in these weeks than I have in the last few years in my own home. After breakfast, oatmeal with dried fruit, which Martha somehow miraculously makes tasty even on the camp burner, we gather the necessary gear for the day's expedition. I check my backpack. Geology hammer, magnifying glass, notebook, water bottle, light lunch, sunscreen, everything's in place. Vivian, don't forget your hat, Martha reminds me. It's going to be hot today. I nod gratefully and put on the wide-brimmed hat I bought in Sedona on the way here. I would never have worn one before. Shannon would probably say it aged me. But out here in the desert, practicality trumps fashion, and no one judges by appearance. We're hitting the road. Professor Larson leads the way, followed by the rest of the group in a chain. I walk beside Martha and Jim, with whom I've grown closest over the weeks. They've been married for 43 years, but they still hold hands as they walk and look at each other with a tenderness that makes my heart ache. How do you manage? I ask when we're going up a particularly steep hill. How do you do what? Jim asks, helping his wife over a large rock. Keeping a relationship like this for so many years, I say. You look like newlyweds. Martha laughs, her tanned face crinkling into a mesh of wrinkles. Oh, we've had our hard times, dear, but the secret is simple: respect and space. Space? I ask again. Yes, Jim nods. Giving each other enough space to be ourselves. Martha has always loved astronomy, and I've always loved geology. We didn't try to change each other's hobbies, but found a way to combine them in our lives. And we always considered each other's opinions, Martha adds, even when we disagreed. I think about that when I think about my marriage to Howard. We were the same way. He supported my passion for minerals. I admired his love of old cars. We were different, but we respected those differences. And then I let Elliot and Shannon corner me, become invisible in my own home. Hey, Vivian! Professor Larson calls out to me, stopping at a large reddish boulder. Take a look at this structure. What do you think? I step closer, pulling out a magnifying glass. The surface of the stone is mottled with thin veins of lighter colored material. Quartz flecks in the basalt? I suggest, running my finger over the rough surface. Exactly. The professor nods approvingly. You have a great eye, Vivian. I feel my cheeks warm at the praise. At my 65, I can still be embarrassed by kind words. Probably because I've hardly heard them in recent years. By noon, we reached the North Rift, a deep crack in the rock exposing layers formed over millions of years. Professor Larson explains how to read Earth history from these layers, and I listen mesmerized, making notes in my notebook. Look! Suddenly exclaims Barbara, a retired librarian from New Mexico. Right there in the rock. We all step closer. In a cleft in the rock, we can see dark red crystals embedded in the rock. Pyropy, confirms the professor enthusiastically. Great find, Barbara. For the next hour, we carefully extract the specimens, being careful not to damage the crystals. I find a particularly beautiful specimen, a dark red, almost purple garnet the size of a pinky fingernail. The professor helps me carefully separate it from the rock. A fine specimen, Vivian, he says as I wrap it in a soft cloth. It will be the pride of your collection. I smile as I imagine placing it alongside the others in my new apartment in Sedona. I rented it for 6 months, small but bright, overlooking the red rocks. The first place I chose entirely on my own, guided only by my own preferences. We returned to camp towards evening, tired but satisfied. After dinner, stewed beans and cornbread cooked over a campfire. We sit around the fire, sharing stories and experiences of the day. I've got something for tonight's feast, Jim says, pulling a bottle of whiskey out of his backpack. It's not every day we get a find like this. And it's not every day we get the honor of being in the company of such a wonderful new friend, Martha adds, lifting the plastic cup in my direction. I blink in surprise. With me? Of course, she smiles. You joined us 3 weeks ago, and it's been a wonderful 3 weeks. To Vivian! To Vivian! The others join in, raising their glasses. I feel tears coming to my eyes. 3 weeks, and these people appreciate me more than my own family has in years. After an impromptu toast, the conversation flows easily and casually. Barbara talks about her travels in South America, Professor Larson shares stories from her academic life, and Tom, a former Colorado firefighter, makes everyone laugh with tales of rescued kittens and children stuck in trees. When it's my turn, I'm a little shy. I haven't traveled that much, I confess. I've spent most of my life in Ann Arbor, raising my son and working as an accountant. But you've always been interested in geology? The professor asks. I nod. I started collecting minerals in college. My husband Howard encouraged this hobby after he died. I stammer. It kind of took a back seat, family obligations, you know. And now you've decided to return to your hobby, Martha said, smiling. That's wonderful. Not just the hobby, I say quietly. To myself. That night I can't sleep for a long time, staring at the stars through the tent's mesh window. You can see so many of them here, millions of luminous dots on the black velvet of the sky. In Ann Arbor, the city lights make it almost impossible to see the stars. Another reason why I'm glad I went. The morning after breakfast, Professor Larson announces that it's time for us to head back to Sedona. The expedition is coming to an end. We pack up camp in a friendly bustle, helping each other pack tents and gear. What do you plan to do next, Vivian? Martha asks as we fold her tent. I'm going to stay in Sedona for now, I answered. I've rented an apartment there for 6 months. I want to explore the area, maybe enroll in a geology course at the local college. That's a great idea, she approves. Jim and I are heading back to Oregon, but we plan to come to Sedona for Christmas. We can get together. I'd love to, I reply sincerely. By noon, all the gear is packed into 2 SUVs and we're ready to leave. I get in the car with Martha, Jim, and Professor Larson. The 2-hour drive to Sedona flies by as we talk about minerals, geologic formations, and plans for future expeditions. You should join us in the spring, says the professor. We're going to Utah. There are amazing agate deposits there. I will, I nod, feeling excited at the prospect of new adventures. We say goodbye in Sedona, exchanging phone numbers and email addresses. Martha hugs me tightly. Remember, Vivian, she whispers in my ear. It's never too late to start living for real. I nod, swallowing the lump in my throat. It's never too late. My apartment greets me with silence and coolness. It's small, just one bedroom, a living room with a kitchenette and a tiny balcony, but it's all mine. I've arranged the bare minimum of furniture: a bed, a table, two chairs, a bookshelf. A few pictures on the walls, including one of Howard and me on a black sand beach. And of course, a special cabinet for my mineral collection, which I ordered before I left for the expedition. I unpack my backpack, carefully placing the new specimens in the special drawers of the cabinet. The Piropi takes pride of place in the center. Its dark red color contrasts beautifully with the white quartz and green malachite. Then I shower, washing away the desert dust, and change into clean clothes. I open the windows, letting in the fresh air and the sounds of the city. I make tea. Real black, strong tea, just the way I like it, and sit in a chair by the window, savoring the moment. My gaze falls on the stack of mail on the table that I left before I left for the expedition. It's mostly flyers and bills, but a pink envelope with a child's handwriting stands out. I pick it up, immediately recognizing Piper's neat letters. My heart sinks. How did she find my address? It must have been through Claire, the only person I'd told where I was moving to, and that was only after I'd already been to Arizona. I hold the envelope for a minute, hesitating to open it. Then I take a deep breath and open it. "Dear Grandma," it says in neat, childish handwriting. "I miss you very much. When we got back from Hawaii, you weren't home. Daddy said you were away traveling. Is that true? Aunt Claire gave me your address, even though Dad and Mom don't know I'm writing to you. I brought you the seashell from the beach like I promised. It's very pretty, pink with white stripes. I put it in an envelope. Please write to me. I want to know you're doing well. Love you, Piper." I flip the envelope over, and a small pink shell, a perfectly preserved cowrie with delicate white stripes, falls into the palm of my hand. My eyes fill with tears. Piper has kept her promise. What am I supposed to do? Answer her? Call Elliot? Go back? No, I can't go back. Not after everything that's happened. Not after finally finding myself. I pick up my phone and check it for the first time in 3 weeks. 37 missed calls from Elliot, a dozen from Shannon, a few messages. I don't open them. Instead, I go into my contacts and decisively delete my son and daughter-in-law's numbers. It's painful, but necessary. Toxic relationships need to be pruned completely, like a diseased tree branch. But Piper is different. She's not to blame for her parents' behavior. And she's the only one who genuinely pines for me. I pull out a blank piece of paper and a pen. "Dear Piper," I write, "thank you for the beautiful seashell. It now has a place of honor in my collection next to the red garnet I found in the Grand Canyon. Yes, I do travel. I currently live in Arizona in the town of Sedona, surrounded by red rocks. It is beautiful here, and I have made new friends who share my fascination with minerals and rocks. I miss you too, sweetheart, and I want you to know that I'm fine. More than okay. For the first time in a long time, I feel really happy. I hope you're not mad at me for leaving without saying goodbye. Sometimes adults make difficult decisions that are hard to explain. When you're older, maybe you'll understand better. I'm leaving you my email address and phone number. You can write to me whenever you want. But please don't tell your parents we're in touch yet. It'll be our little secret, okay? One more thing. Remember my old binoculars that you like so much? I saved it for you. When you're older, it'll be yours. Love, your grandmother." I reread the letter, making sure there is nothing in it to upset the child. Then I seal it in an envelope, scribble Claire's address. She'll find a way to give it to Piper without attracting Elliot and Shannon's attention, and set it aside to mail tomorrow. I get up and walk over to the window. The sun is beginning to set, coloring the red rocks of Sedona with fiery hues. The beauty of this place is breathtaking, and I am part of that beauty, part of this world. Not someone's mother, not someone's mother-in-law, not someone's grandmother, just Vivian. A woman who has finally decided to live her life. I deserve that. I deserve respect, recognition, joy. I deserve friends who appreciate me. I deserve adventure, new discoveries, new horizons. Maybe someday Elliot will understand why I left. Maybe someday he'll learn a lesson from this story and learn to appreciate the people in his life. Or maybe he won't. That's not my concern anymore. My concern is to live my remaining years fully, vividly, without regret. As Martha said, it's never too late to start really living. And I am, right now.